Welcome back to Comic Cappers. Today we will be capping an absolute Green Lantern number 2. The fallout from the Evergreen catastrophe begins to take hold as the terrifying nature of this weaponized power continues to bond with Hal Jordan. With that said, grab a snack, sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. The dread starts immediately. A singular point of light cuts through the void, addressing Sojourner Mullen with a cold, detached command. The light expands, pulsing with an invasive rhythm. It's not just speaking, it's defining the rules of existence. It claims Jo exists at the green level of light and demands she possess total self-knowledge to command this flame. The pressure intensifies. The entity repeats its terrifying prerequisite. To wield this power, one must be entirely, utterly devoid of fear. We snap back to reality as the green energy violently lashes out, fracturing across Jo's face. She's reeling, clearly overwhelmed by the psychic assault, as someone nearby calls out in confusion, trying to snap her back to consciousness. Hal Jordan stands amidst the wreckage, staring down Jo Mullen. She's currently suspended in that eerie, pulsating green light, and the resemblance to Abin Sur isn't lost on him. He's clearly trying to piece together the horror of what this entity has done to her. Jo is visibly struggling, clutching her head as the power forces itself upon her. She admits she's just as lost as he is, insisting that Hal was there for the whole descent into madness. Her internal state is fracturing. She describes a sensory nightmare, hearing voices, seeing things that shouldn't be there, and a relentless, magnetic pull that dragged her straight to this disaster. Finally, the focus shifts to the source of the infection. Jo locks eyes with Hal, realizing he's the anchor for this cosmic parasite, and zeroes in on the dark, damaged state of his hand. Hal stares at his hand, now consumed by the void-like black hand corruption. He warns Jo to keep her distance, terrified because the power reacts to his own fear and perceived threats. He describes the sensation as an invasive, dark star burning inside his mind. Jo stands amidst the wreckage, bathed in the eerie, pulsating green light of the entity. She questions Hal, trying to understand if his fear was the literal trigger for the catastrophe that left this place in ruins. Hal confesses that he fought with everything he had to suppress the power, only to realize the classic Green Lantern trope of willpower is completely broken here. He's haunted by the fate of his peers, John and Guy, realizing they are all just casualties in a game where the rules are designed to kill them. Everything turns a sickly, oppressive green as the entity arrives to deliver its ultimatum. This isn't the hero we know, it's a cosmic force that views humanity through a cold, alien lens. As it hovers above the terrified crowd, it demands the impossible, that they be entirely without fear. The caption hauntingly echoes the fate of those who came before, turning the Green Lantern's iconic oath into a terrifying, singular command. Guy Gardner steps up, trying to project the kind of small-town authority that usually de-escalates a situation. He's ordering his deputies to stand down, desperately hoping that asserting his title as Sheriff of Evergreen will mean something to this cosmic intruder. It's a brave, albeit futile, attempt to impose human order on an entity that clearly operates by a far more terrifying set of rules. Guy doubles down, puffing out his chest and pointing to his badge. He's trying to bridge the gap with the concept of the law, but the look on Abin Sur's face is cold, alien, and completely unimpressed. Guy's confidence is visibly fraying. He's trying to reason with a force that doesn't care about jurisdiction or badges. The silence is broken by the most ominous words imaginable. Abin Sur finally speaks, and it isn't an invitation to talk, it's a sentence. As the entity raises its hand, the green energy flares, signaling that Guy's attempt at diplomacy has failed. Judgment isn't a trial, it's an execution. The confrontation hits a breaking point. As the entity begins to channel its lethal energy, the local officers try to intervene, but they're clearly out of their depth against a force that doesn't play by the rules of law enforcement. The entity remains terrifyingly detached, dismissing Guy Gardner's status entirely. It doesn't see a sheriff, it sees a non-entity, a life form outside the spectrum of light that it's supposedly here to judge. The tension reaches a fever pitch. The officers are desperate, screaming for Guy to say the word, to find some way to be without fear, but the entity is already closing the distance, and the look of pure dread on Guy's face says it all. He's realized too late that there's no negotiating with a nightmare. The tension in Evergreen is boiling over. Jo Mullen is trying to maintain some semblance of order, but the locals are panicked and aggressive, rightfully terrified by the massive spaceship hanging in the sky. Jo is trying to keep the peace, but the crowd is beyond listening. Tempers flare. The authority of the law is clashing with the sheer scale of the cosmic threat. It's a chaotic scene where everyone is looking for answers and nobody has any. John Stewart tries to pull Jo back, his tone desperate. He knows the danger here isn't just a matter of police protocol, it's something far more lethal. Jo isn't backing down. She points to the obvious evidence of the entity's power, the massive energy dome trapping them all inside the town limits. She drives the point home with a grim reality check. They've already seen the cost of testing that barrier. A motorcycle rider hit it and didn't survive. Joe turns the focus back to Guy Gardner, questioning his reckless posturing. She knows that pulling a gun on an entity like this isn't bravery, it's a death sentence. Guy's only response is a defensive, aggressive retort. He's doubling down on the confrontation, completely blind to the fact that he's walking straight into a trap. Hal sits in the wreckage, his eyes locked on the standoff, haunted by the weight of the moment. He's watching Guy Gardner, desperately hoping the sheriff makes the right call, though we know how this ends. The perspective shifts to Hal's internal view. He's transfixed by the faces in the crowd, Evergreen residents he's known his entire life, now caught in the wake of something truly alien. It's a chilling tableau. He reads the crowd's expressions, a mix of raw shock, primal fear, and a terrifying, misplaced religious awe at the entity's power. The silence is the most unsettling part. The entire town has gone deathly quiet, like everyone is collectively holding their breath as the cosmic judgment begins. Hal's expression says it all. He knows exactly what's coming, and the weight of the entire town's fate now rests on the shoulders of a man who is completely out of his depth. Guy Gardner holds his ground, his expression unreadable as the cosmic entity looms. The silence is heavy, pressing down on everyone in the square. Guy makes the call to de-escalate, his hands steady as he orders his officers to lower their weapons. Roy and Rita hesitate, but Guy pushes them, demanding compliance to keep the standoff from spiraling into a massacre. Guy steps forward, addressing the entity directly. He's trying to bridge the gap between human logic and this cold, alien judgment, pleading for a moment of clarity. He makes his final, desperate appeal, asking the entity to state its purpose, hoping that communication might actually work where force failed. Hal Jordan observes the crowd's reaction, noting the sudden, fragile relief sweeping through the town, a brief moment of false hope before the inevitable. Hal's eyes widen as he realizes that the peace was just a precursor to something much worse. Just as Guy Gardner attempts to reason with the entity, the facade of peace shatters instantly. A violent, blinding surge of green energy erupts, consuming the space between them in a deafening, reality-warping blast. There is no negotiation here, only the cold, absolute judgment of a power that views humanity as nothing more than a variable to be erased. John Stewart, Hal, and the others watch in stunned silence as the reality of their situation shifts from a tense standoff into an absolute nightmare. The hope that Guy Gardner could de-escalate this has been incinerated. Hal Jordan sits apart, his connection to the power becoming agonizingly clear as he covers his face. The caption confirms the horror. The moment of negotiation is over and the terror begins. The entity looms over the crowd, a grotesque, multi-armed silhouette of cosmic judgment. It dismisses the life it just destroyed, cold and demanding, as the citizens of Evergreen realize they are trapped in a trial they cannot possibly win. With Guy Gardner down, the remaining officers of Evergreen have reached their breaking point. Desperation takes over as they draw their weapons and open fire, hoping conventional force can stop a cosmic entity that clearly plays by different rules. The bullets don't even slow it down. The entity, this twisted, absolute version of Abin Sur, doesn't even flinch. It simply manifests a barrier of green energy, the bullets flattening against it with a series of dull, rhythmic impacts. It's an exercise in futility, and the entity knows it. With a flick of its wrist, the entity remains completely unmoved by the assault. It issues its cold, robotic command once more, forcing the survivors to confront the terrifying reality that their resistance is not just ineffective, it's an insult to the entity's twisted standard of judgment. An officer takes a desperate shot, hoping against hope that lead can stop a god. The bullet hits the energy shield surrounding the Abin Sur entity, dissolving instantly into nothingness. But the entity doesn't just block, it retaliates with terrifying precision, striking down another officer before they can even process the failure. The body hits the ground, a grim reminder of the cost of defiance. The entity remains entirely cold, a statue of judgment looking over the carnage it has wrought. The officer who fired the first shot freezes, the realization of her own mortality finally sinking in. Without a word, the entity swings its arm, a massive construct of raw, hungry energy manifesting. It tears through the air, a violent streak of green that leaves no room for escape. The screen fades to black as the entity finishes its work, the silence of Evergreen replaced by the finality of judgment. The horror in Evergreen reaches a breaking point as another officer is brutally cut down. The sheer speed of the entity's judgment leaves no room for mercy. Driven by grief and blind rage, a desperate survivor opens fire, screaming at the monster that just destroyed their colleague. The bullets are nothing. The entity barely acknowledges the threat, its energy field absorbing every round without a flicker of concern. With a flick of its hand, the entity unleashes a wave of raw emerald destruction, turning the tables on the attacker in an instant. The weapon is knocked away, rendered useless in the face of such overwhelming power. The officer collapses, clutching the fatal wound, the light fading from their eyes as the reality of their failure sets in. All that remains is a smoking, severed hand, the final, gruesome testament to the price of fighting back against a god. The chaos of the entity's strike has left the survivors scrambling to save what remains of their team. Jon Stewart and Joe Mullen are in full triage mode, desperate to keep the wounded alive in the wake of the carnage. Jon focuses all his energy on the man down, urging him to hold on, but the situation is rapidly spiraling out of control. In the background, the grim reality of the scene is punctuated by a discarded gun, a useless tool against the cosmic horror they're facing. Jon looks toward Hal Jordan, needing help to stabilize the patient, but Hal is completely zoned out, staring into the void as if he's hearing something the others can't. Jon's voice cuts through the tension again, but Hal is miles away, drifting into the dark, hungry influence of the power he's currently tethered to. Hal finally snaps out of his catatonic state, stepping directly into the path of the Abin Sur entity. He's not here to talk, and he's definitely not here to plead. He's holding that gun with the grim, hollow resolve of a man who's already decided the world is better off without this thing. The entity acknowledges Hal with a cold, terrifying familiarity, confirming that his judgment is already underway. Hal's expression is haunting. There's no trace of fear left in him, only a strange, detached calm as he prepares to face the cosmic parasite head-on. Joe Mullen is locked in, desperately holding pressure on the wounded Roy, while Jon Stewart tries to reason with an unblinking Hal. The stakes are absolute. If Hal engages this entity, he's not just risking his life, he's throwing it away. Hal isn't listening. He's completely tunnel-visioned, gun leveled at the glowing, judgmental force of Abin Sur. Jon steps in, physically trying to intervene, shouting at Hal to lower the weapon before he meets the same gruesome fate as the local police force. Jon's warning is chillingly blunt. He knows what this power is capable of, and he's watching his friend walk straight into the abyss. Hal's grip on the gun remains steady, but the reality of the threat, that the ring won't just kill him, it will take his body apart, is finally staring him in the face. The Abin Sur entity isn't just ignoring the chaos, it's actively targeting the group, locking onto Jon Stewart with a chilling, robotic command. You can feel the confusion radiating off Jon as he realizes he's been singled out by this cosmic nightmare. Without hesitation, the entity unleashes a massive, reality-bending vortex of green energy. It's a terrifying display of power, not a weapon of protection, but a swirling, hungry storm that forces Jon and Hal to scramble for their lives. As the dust settles, the immediate threat shifts. Jon is forced to prioritize the wounded, calling out to Hal to hand over the weapon. It's a desperate attempt to regain control, but Hal is still standing apart, staring into the heart of the destruction, completely fixated on the entity. Joe Mullen is trying to ground the situation, pressing Hal on the weapon he's holding. It's a tense, quiet moment of investigation amidst the carnage, as she identifies the gun as Rita's and questions why it never made it to Jon Stewart. Hal's hand, encased in that dark, encroaching corruption, begins to react. It's a visual manifestation of the power's instability, shifting and pulsing with a life of its own. Focusing in on the weapon, we see the corruption bleeding onto the metal itself. The gun isn't just a tool anymore, it's being subsumed by the very force Hal is struggling to contain. Hal finally looks down at the piece, his expression weary and detached. He offers a hollow, simple explanation for why he's still armed. Hal pivots to a grim warning. He's feeling the entity's influence, describing it not as a hero's power, but as a predatory alien hunger, a force that specifically craves the light. Hal is spiraling, trying to articulate the impossible nature of the power that has latched onto him. He explains that it's not just absorbing light, but actively trying to win an argument, to supersede and overturn reality itself. Joe is clearly rattled, begging him to put the gun down as the corruption continues to manifest. The horror deepens as Hal describes the entity as an ancient, discarded idea that has been fed and empowered until it's now woven into the fabric of everything. He's physically and mentally straining to resist its influence, even as he admits he's fighting a losing battle against its siren song. Hal's eyes reflect the total, terrifying surrender. He stares out, haunted by the realization that despite his best efforts to stay human, the entity is convincing him that its destructive, judgmental path is the only one that makes sense. And that unfortunately concludes our comic cap for today. With Hal admitting the Green Lantern power is actively rewriting his logic, do you think he can still be saved, or has he already crossed the point of no return? Let me know your answer in the comments section down below. Be sure to subscribe and press that notification bell for daily comic caps. Until next time, take care, brush your hair, I'll see you when I see you, peace.